Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Movie Trap. My name is Zach Powers.
I'm Chris Boroff.
And I'm Russell Carlson.
If you are new to the show, which is extremely plausible because it's a relatively new show, this is a show in which we discuss movies. We're three white men discussing movies, so a very novel podcast concept. But we have nothing like it on the air. We have a slight twist. A, we're not necessarily just discussing terrible movies, and B, we also choose a theme for each round of 3 episodes. Each of us picks a movie in that theme, and at the end, we vote on who had the best choice, and that person gets to choose the following theme. Normally, we have a bet of 10 points apiece, but as a little twist, we also have a reserve of 3 points that we can't use, but we can award to any of the other hosts or not award for any reason, just to spice things up. And so on non-voting episodes like this one, there might be a little bit of magic still happening in terms of the game.
Yes. You have to change it up every time. It's like every reality show out there. Every new season, there's some new twist, you know?
Yeah. Eventually we'll do like battles of the generations or heroes versus villains when we bring back guest stars that...
There you have it.
Yeah. We're either terrible or great.
And then we'll go to the every other reality TV show where it just becomes Celebrity Movie Trap.
Yeah. Eventually we'll get to
we can just start yelling about our Twitter on air.
Yeah, that's fun. This episode is kind of unique. It is the first episode in this new run of this revival of the show in which we are maybe the first episode ever in which we're discussing a movie that none of the hosts had ever seen prior to watching it for this episode. The movie is appropriately titled Blind Spotting in the category of shitty cops. That's our theme for this go-round, tying into, if you're listening into the future, there are some protests going on and a pandemic. It's just, you might remember this happening.
That's right.
Yeah, there's a mixture of strong public gathering as well as social distancing with masks on at the same time. It's a confusing time, but a lot of things are occurring, both good and bad and otherwise.
Yes, yeah. And let's also not forget an election year. That means nothing, right? That doesn't matter. Anyway.
Oh, man, that's happening too.
Yeah, I know it. Oh, boy. You gotta buckle up, dude. We're only in June of this year. It's going to be a rough one. So, Zach, why don't you go ahead and summarize Blind Spotting for us as best as you can?
Blind Spotting is a 2018 movie that features a main character named Colin, who had about a year prior to the beginning of the movie been released from a short prison term after a felony assault charge. He's on the last few days of his probation before, obviously he gets to move home and doesn't have to have a curfew anymore and these sort of restrictive measures. His best friend is a fellow named Miles, who is a white guy. They both live in Oakland, California. And during the last few days, a number of things happen, including Colin witnesses a policeman shoot a fleeing suspect. He kind of negotiates his relationship with the woman who was his girlfriend prior to him being sent off to jail, a woman named Val, and deals with basically police brutality, racism, gentrification, all in Oakland, California.
Yeah, it's also it's very current. It was surprising you hadn't seen it, and it still aligned up with what we're doing. This is the first really challenge, sort of not playing it safe with the game. You went out on the limb. You decided we're going to do a new one we haven't seen before, and I think it was a good time this time. It was interesting.
Yeah, I rather enjoyed it. And also this is like the first movie that we did that is kind of really down to earth, like the even Rear Window. I mean, maybe just because it's so long ago, still feels sort of like far away. This does feel like I'm looking outside,
With the caveat that I think a lot of the filmmaking in this is very stylized and interesting. The actual plot is, for the most part, very, very down to earth.
It's very human plot. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they even give you that opening montage really kind of localizes it in Oakland. I
Great
live out in
place to
California.
shoot.
And, yeah,
I mean, it looks like a lot of great places to shoot out there. I mean, like,
Well-
I think this was shot right alongside of the Boots Riley movie.
Sorry to bother
which is
you.
also, which is also takes place in
there
Oakland.
was one bodega that I saw in one scene of this movie that I'm pretty sure is also in Sorry to Bother You.
I've definitely been to the Oakland Fox Theater. I've definitely been there, seen Neurosis play for sure. Been to that
Yeah.
fucking theater, parked in that
Well,
neighborhood.
It's interesting. They did a great job sort of localizing this story and really kind of getting a good sense of what that area feels like, or at least the change that's occurring, because a lot of it's about gentrification. It's similar to like Collateral, if you guys remember that movie from way back when. Like, I hadn't seen a movie that really got what downtown LA looks and feels like around Koreatown, and that movie really nailed it. So this one, to me, was remarkable because it really kind of nailed the sense of being in Oakland and in San Francisco and the Bay Area in general.
Yeah, and you know, having lived in a neighborhood, not necessarily in New York, but definitely in Los Angeles, going through gentrification. I remember when we applied for the apartment out there, the lady that we were applying to literally says, "Oh, don't worry, this neighborhood's becoming gentrified." And I'm just like, "Oh, we just say it out the open, huh? We just say it to each other. That's just, here we are. Yeah, we says, here's your white man and your white woman and your nice little dog, and yes, you may have this apartment." But
Yeah,
still,
this movie asks some really interesting questions about gentrification and how it's kind of evil, because it's like there's a lot of nice things that suddenly show up. I think the cup of green juice that they keep drinking really kind of brought that back, because when they first drink it, it's like, oh God, this is disgusting. And I guess spoiler, by the end of the movie, we should mention we do spoilers on this. I think we forgot that.
Oh, correct. We will be
definitely.
spoiling
Yes.
the entirety of
That's
this
right.
film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spoilers.
We will be spoiling out of every
green-
orifice of this movie. Every spoil
the
we
green
can
juice
think
spoiler
of.
is about to drop.
Yeah, especially relevant for this movie because it's, I think, the most... No, it's not the most recent movie we've done, but it's close to it.
Close to it.
Yeah.
But even, again, Lighthouse still, it takes place in like the late 1800s and still like,
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
scary movie. This is definitely a movie of the time it's made in.
Yeah, but just to wrap it up, it's just that the green juice is like gross by the start, and by the end, one of the characters starts drinking it and thinks it's okay. And they kind of get into the fact that it's essentially people moving into lower income areas, taking over businesses, taking over neighborhoods, pushing out people who no longer can afford to live there, and then changing the fabric of the neighborhood at such a fundamental level that it is really it's an extension of like general racism, and it's not something I really was aware of back in 2010, but it's something that I've definitely become aware of now
For
in
sure.
LA, because there are entire areas that are getting wiped out the same way.
For sure.
The movie
Yeah.
has an extended sort of... Well, there's a few examples in this movie of like the effects of gentrification that I really... I like quite a bit. I like the way that this is in the first scene and it gets followed up at a later scene at a party. But there's a place called the Quick Way that clearly these
I love that
characters
shit.
have like been like a fan of for a long time living in Oakland. And it's just had its grand reopening. It only serves vegan burgers unless you specify otherwise, and they now deliver. One of the characters is so angry that the Quick Way now delivers because it's right in the title that it's quick and it's around the way. They don't cater.
That was Miles who did it. And by the way, I think this is one of his first like real movies where he's actually acting.
I
in
have
it.
a few things to say about the creative team behind
Yeah,
this.
I actually, well, let me get into that for a little bit because I think it's unusual. You know, like I'm reminded of the William Goldman quote when he was talking about All the President's Men, because Robert Redford was the producer of that movie, and him trying to hire someone who was going to play opposite him, and B, someone who is going to direct him. And Goldman kind of opines about the awkwardness of that meeting, you know, where you're going to be directing me, but I'm your boss. So like it is kind of a weird relationship, and it's kind of similar with this one because both the actors, Daveed Diggs and
Raphael Quissel.
yeah, they wrote the screenplay. They were executive producers of it. They did not direct it. It's directed by another first time. This is like I think his first major motion picture.
Carlos Lopez Estrada.
Yeah, right.
He's known mostly for a variety of music videos.
Yeah, and TV shows too. He did Legion.
Yeah.
He did a couple episodes of
an
Legion,
episode
if
of
I'm not
Legion.
mistaken. Which is, right on. I think that's great. I think given how good it looks without really biting off more than it can chew, well done. Fucking well done. But I wanted to talk about that. Is there, like, imagine that kind of awkwardness of, like, having to pick a director that you're going to be directing me and my pal. We wrote this. We're kind of producing this. We're your boss. So how much leeway do you think a director like that actually has? Or do you think this was more or less probably a conversation that started right away? At least that's how Goldman talked about it with All the President's Men.
I'm sure Zach probably did some additional research. I know that these guys worked on it for about 10 years. I'm assuming that
Wow,
in
10 years.
this-
That's amazing.
Yeah, they were writing it like 10 years ago. These guys, it's semi-autobiographical. They knew each other since they were kids. They grew up in Oakland.
They met in high school when Daveed Diggs, who plays Colin, was a senior, and I believe Raphael was a freshman at the time. This was at Berkeley High School. Raphael got expelled 2 years into his career there. But
Love it.
Well, to answer your question, though, like, I think every directing situation's different. Like, oftentimes you'll get hired on and you get pulled in and you have to figure out what the client wants. Sometimes it is your baby. However, if you're a TV director, when you go in, it is the writer's baby.
Right.
Like, you are a hired gun who
Right, but
comes
you
in
also-
and shoots what you're told to.
Right, but you're also in a position to where you have to direct the writers, and because they're playing the characters, and it's still kind of your movie. But I guess on the contrary wise, I think that it would be kind of fun to work with people who are so passionate. This is their baby, and you kind of feel like do you kind of get like a midwife syndrome where you're just sort of guiding it along with their vision sort of thing? And I guess, when this is a first time directing sort of thing, it's kind of nice to have that much passion and love for a project. You don't really have to motivate them in the morning. They're ready to go.
I suspect there was at least a fair amount of trust in this director for a couple reasons. One, obviously we mentioned that a lot of the direction is very stylistic. And I suspect these people had seen his work on TV and in music videos, and that was part of the reason why they hired them, because in particular, these guys, Raphael Cassell did some TV work prior to this. So did Daveed Diggs, but Daveed Diggs mostly, both of them actually really were connected to the public theater in New York City, where Raphael Cassell does like a theatrical acting teaching class. And Daveed Diggs, he's still most famous for being in the original cast of Hamilton as Thomas Jefferson / Marquis de Lafayette. In fact, the woman who plays Raphael Cassell's wife,
Schuyler.
she was also in the original cast of Hamilton. So it seems like these are guys with a lot of theatrical background. They wrote this script.
Jasmine Cephas Jones.
Yeah, daughter
is
of Ron
Miles's wife.
Cephas. Ron Cephas Jones is her dad. He's in a bunch of stuff like Mr. Robot.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. That suddenly clicks together.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I love Mr. Robot. Sorry.
That was a good show. No, I don't know. I think it's cool, but I'm just, because it's always what I think about when I watch these movies, and then when I look them up on IMDb, these two guys who I think both of them were fantastic in this movie. I mean, I think that both of them are great futures ahead of them, but I'll get to that later. But again, considering I'm not surprised that their background is in stage performance, because of within the screenplay how hip hop and rapping is so intertwined into it. It's in a way like Shakespeare would do it. I sort of, it's very evident, and I think that this film walks that line every time they throw in musical theater randomly into movies, and I don't see it coming. I'm always taken back, and it usually doesn't bode well. But this one worked really, really well because it felt more organic, and it felt more like they're just fucking rapping. They're just chilling.
It's also a thing where I don't know if it's just confirmation bias on my part, but I know that since the multiple people in this were in Hamilton, a variety of the rapping scenes that have sort of a cadence to them, like for instance the dream sequence in the courtroom and things like that, feel a little bit more inflected by Hamilton and sort of how some of the structural stuff happened there. I don't know if that might be stretching it too far, and I'll let you guys speak to that.
Well,
but
one or both of them prior to the success of Hamilton was also in a hip hop group, so they definitely have a background
I think they themselves are on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Well, I know they do hip hop themselves. I was just saying, in this case, the musical theater element, where it's like occasionally going into rap to deal with the somewhat very difficult to express emotional context stuff of racism and how it affects people. I think it's easier to listen to that and understand that in terms of the music and the rap going on, because I think if somebody was to just say those lines, it would come out tin. I don't think it would come out well. That's
because music's an emotive thing, and rapping is music. So like without that emotion, if it is just like a Laurence Olivier speech in Julius Caesar or whatever, you wouldn't, not that it's not emotional that Laurence Olivier does it, easy internet, but there's stuff you can't convey just with words. And rap is a great venue of marrying the images to the words. The whole concept of blind spotting, I think, is pretty unique. What they call it and what it is and how they utilize it throughout the film. But anyway, I just wanted to talk, because every time that they spring out musical theater to me on a movie and I don't see it coming, unless it's played just right. Because I could even argue that dream sequence that happens in the movie, and it's a fucking killer rap, dude. They're good at what they do. It has to be played just right, and this movie did that.
I think that the dream sequence is the closest thing to a fully true musical number in the movie. Even from like the very first scene, they established that these guys freestyle just as they're walking around. So in that scene, and there's one where they're moving stuff from a house, and the scene, it's not a full-fledged like piece, but like even as the scene fades away, they're still kind of rhyming with each other as like the camera pulls back and it fades away. And that's a scene where they go from being passive observers to actively having to create an empty house and encourage gentrification in their own area. Is that the same?
Fucking brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the end, they even comment on the use of music a little bit by, there's a line when he confronts the cop at the end about how people are sort of trained or more likely to listen to a black man rapping than a black man talking, which sort of puts another layer of why they chose to use that device.
That went right over my head first time around. So that fucking great.
That essentially is sort of describing what we just did. So that's probably very accurate.
Yeah.
And what they do when they just hang out, we freestyle. When we hang out, we just talk about movies. Look at us, freestyle.
And just because I'm kind of a bleeding heart liberal on this thing, if we're all white guys, we're white males, we probably have our own biases and our own things we're unaware of. Remembering back to 10 years ago when we first did this podcast and some of the opinions I had at the time, and then moving out into the real world, or at least moving out where I had to like interact with people, a lot of views I had were changed significantly because they went from things that I was saying to other people that I knew immediately to saying them to people that were actively being affected by some of the things occurring with racism. So what I'm saying is that if we get into something on this that is not correct, I would be very open to being corrected below or having something explained additionally. And I am just generally hoping that no one takes anything we're saying here as being insensitive to any of that, which is something I feel very strongly about now, having become a bleeding heart liberal on the West Coast.
The fact that I love the way this movie deals with race, in that Raphael's character Miles is confused with a transplant, and that's what sets him off.
Yeah.
That's when he fucking can't stand it. He wouldn't be mistaken for a transplant if he weren't white. I think that they're kind of implying that a little bit in the movie. And I think that's what set him off. Everything's changing around him. I think the reason why this movie's great is because it's dealing with perdition. Change is happening. And how, whether good or bad change, how people are affecting themselves to that. And not so much change even in the material, but how people look at each other is changing. You're one of the big moments of the movie is, it could be a little bit just like customer exposition comes in here and then just lays out what happened, but they do it very well. I think done with a different sort of creative group that could have been very hacky. But I think that it was done pretty well because you revealed the real conflict between his ex-girlfriend and Collins without them really saying anything, and it's very, very powerful, and that's the whole point of the movie.
Well, they also do the very smart thing, I think, of introducing the actual sociological terms without having it like it's not a teacher pulls them aside and does the stand by me moment of explaining what implicit bias is or anything like that. It's that he's helping his girlfriend at the time read cue cards so that she can do well on her studies. And then they talk about it later, and it's where the term for the whole movie, blind spotting, comes from. But it's one of those things where they get into the more serious parts of the cultural change happening and some of the imbalances that have been thrown kind of stark into contrast for a lot of people that probably were unaware of them before.
I lightly suspect that you guys are talking about two different sequences. Chris is talking about the sequence that gives the film its title, where his girlfriend is learning some sort of like about psychological and logic, like she's taking a class on topics like that, and she sees that classic picture that can either be a vase or two faces looking at each other. And your mind, she talks about how your mind instinctually makes the choice immediately which of the two it thinks it is. And even if you can recognize the other one, it's extraordinarily difficult to rewire your mind not to see the one you saw first every single time. And so it's a blind spot. You're blind spotting the picture. And that's obviously relevant to how people see both the white and the black characters in this.
But also how the interpersonal characters see each other.
Yes.
That's what I was kind of getting at with that being the point of the movie with, when you learn the whole story of what happened to him and what ended up in the clink was, and then how the story is how she looks at him, and that is how that's a great dramatic device
the reason I mentioned those two sequences is because I think they bookend each other because she's saying the thing that we see happen. Like she's giving the sociological term, but then we see the actual attack where, it's essentially, it goes out of hand and you can tell that people probably didn't originally intend to hurt each other that badly. However, the Miles character runs around with a gun, firing it in the air a couple times. And the other character, I cannot remember the main character's name. Colin. Jesus, thank you. Colin, of course, is African-American, and, he's constantly having to be extremely over the line as far as, like, how safe he's being, because, he's been in a halfway house, and it's just not the same. Like, the bias for cops stopping him is way higher than it is for Miles. So Miles can just pull a gun out and never go to jail, but if Colin did that, he'd immediately go to jail.
I think for sure. I want to say two things. One, about the sequence where they show what Colin and Miles did. I noticed that the guy who ended up getting beaten up was specifically described as a Colorado white
Colorado
dude,
man, yeah.
Which we are all Colorado natives for those listening.
That's right.
It's sort of native. I knew y'all from Colorado.
Yeah,
I've been
right.
there long enough. I will say that, even though it was probably a little on the nose for calling people out on gentrification, the fact they kept referring to him as Topher Grace made me laugh quite a bit.
Yeah, there was something, they called him Jason Biggs too at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is,
the Scorpion Bowl in general also hits me really funny because it's like everybody's into tiki right now, and tiki's like really big in LA, and even I have gone to do tiki bars and stuff. However, it's entirely cultural appropriation for some of that stuff. Like it's not a real place, it's a concept of a place, so you're going in and getting free drinks more than anything else.
It's just a guy's excuse because they can't go to a regular bar and order a Bahama Mama. They'll make it for you.
Yeah, they would look at you funny if you walked in and said, I would like to get a hurricane, please.
They'll make it for you, but, it's going to be a while.
The other thing about it's about how the characters see each other, I think, is also very well laid out in a scene that mirrors the image of the vase with the two faces early on in the movie. Wayne Knight tells the two of them to face each other, and there's a shot that cuts back between their faces. This is before they've even shown the face thing. But clearly it's meant to be, and for him trying to get them to truly look at each other. And they kind of laugh it off and can't do it and think it's ridiculous. But it mirrors, it's an the image mirrors the actual.
They pay that off even later on too. I think when and I was going to bring this up when I talked about the editing, but like they use a lot of split screen in this movie, which can draw a lot of attention to itself if done poorly. But this I felt was just fine, and especially it was really fine. I thought what made it amazing was the payoff of the image when he's on the phone with her. And they do that split screen, and both cameras on each angle are kind of zooming in, and eventually it does meet that image where they're looking at each other like that. I thought that was just a great payoff of the split screen, But before we continue,
that whole sequence felt really good because it started kind of wide and it got closer as it got more intimate, and also it's always amazing to see actors that, and this is probably a pretty obvious thing, but when you see actors doing phone calls and emoting heavily, those are always interesting scenes to me because the other actor might not be present. So if someone's really getting to the heart of a situation or a subject and crying and being emotional, they're sometimes just doing that into the void. So when they can marry those two together, it's always interesting to me that it works really well.
The other thing I was going to bring up about the gentrification thing, there's a metaphor in the movie that I like quite a lot. They also mention this in the climactic wrap. We'll have to talk about that scene where he confronts the policeman and the actual shooting of the guy.
And the use of police in general.
Yeah. But there is this metaphor that I think is also first mentioned in that Wayne Knight scene. That Wayne Knight character is meant to be like a photographer who lived in this community since way back, and he's finally leaving. He's heading out, and he's photographed the city of Oakland for years and years and years and years. And he has this thing where he puts big oak trees photoshopped into pictures of Oakland because 100 years ago there were oak trees all over. And they use the oak trees as a metaphor for the gentrification, the chopping down of the oak trees. In the hipster party, he has an original Oakland oak tree stump that he uses as a table. And at the end of the movie, they reference black men being cut down like trees. So it's this interesting thing of like the history of Oakland changing through this, I don't know, I guess you would call it kind of violence definitely against the black people, but against the trees. And I really enjoyed the not overuse, but subtle use of that metaphor of the trees as like Oakland being torn down and remade into something new.
It also really kind of did a visual metaphor for appropriation. Because you have a giant party where people are being hipsters and doing their thing, which the party was not a very empathetic scene. I probably would have wanted to just sort of
been to one or two of those parties. Have you, Borf? Been to one or two of those parties?
Yeah,
I have.
They're I'm not good at parties, so those sort of things make me crazy.
I leave first chance I get. I shake hands and I get the fuck out of there.
I have seen instances of that, though. Like in this case, they're using a tree stump, but I have seen things where you go into parties and they'll have something of a cultural history that is not connected to anyone who's part of that house. Where it's like, they have a piece of Polynesian wood or something else, and if you've gone on a vacation there and you've picked up something, you're bringing it back as a trinket. If you're bringing it back as a trinket, that makes sense. But if you just ordered it off eBay and you have it there to point to it and describe it, it's kind of annoying. It's like the scene with the old man in Get Out, where he's describing something on his wall, and you're like, fuck this old man. Mm-hmm. This is weird. He's pointing this out. Fuck him.
Yeah, and there is something kind of a little bit morbid about celebrating the prehistory of Oakland by mounting a piece of its corpse as your centerpiece of your living room. There's something a little bit. That's what I took out of it. Like, look at all the rings. We wouldn't see the rings if the tree was still standing. You prick.
It's also the party where they have the Quick Way burgers, but like the new Quick Way. And they have a giant Oakland sign, and one of the guys who said he moved there from Portland 2 years ago has an Oakland tattoo, the same Oakland tattoo as Miles.
Yeah,
on his
Miles had a
neck.
rough night that night. He had
Yeah.
a really rough night that night. Well, and because it opened that whole bad night, the last night of probation or whatever, starts out really chilling with because they talk a lot about guns and guns ownership and gun safety. You know, like there's a very chilling scene. You know, you know it's one of those movies where it's kind of lighthearted throughout most of it. They're pretty funny, they're charming, but you always know, especially since you saw that cop shoot that guy, you know that there's going to be punctuated violence at any moment in a given time. And when they turn the room and they see that little kid holding the gun, like my blood ran cold. And the scene's very well done. It spoiler alert, it happily works out, but that's how his night starts.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable because it really kind of drives home the fact that violence is ever present and it's unexpected. And it just occurs. Like, you'll see scenes. Like, when you go into that party scene, it looks like the same scene you've seen 100 times, where it's just going to be like, okay, these guys are going to have a bad night. They'll leave. They'll make fun of some hipsters, yada, yada, yada. There'll be some punchlines. But it ends with, like, a gun fight or a guy shooting a gun and someone being beaten. And then it leads to a lot of bad
Badly,
stuff.
too.
It really...
Yeah.
It was amazing to me because it's one of those films where it really played tone against me as the audience member to keep me engaged, because I kept thinking I knew where it was going to go, because I've seen other movies that have a cultural relevance like this, and you kind of have a playbook in your head a little bit of like, okay, well, there's going to be this happen, and then there'll be some sort of a tragic, sad ending where our hero turns into a Jesus figure, and and all these things happen.
Or the bullets don't pierce Daddy when he holds the baby from the angry store owner, store owner, Borf.
Are we talking about fucking Crash again?
You know it.
Fucking bullshit. Fuck Crash. Sorry.
Classic for fans of the old podcast. It's a classic Borf temper tantrum. Is Crash.
Crash still makes my blood boil.
Right, yeah.
We'll get into it another
this
time.
movie is not Crash, thank God. This movie's I'm impressed you said it took him 10 years. It shows. I mean, it's a really great script. It says everything you need to know about these characters, who are, again, very likable. They're very funny. You get along with them. You know, like they're your pals.
It plays funny because it plays like if Good Will Hunting was about real problems rather than just Matt Damon being too handsome and smart to stay in Southie Boston.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a lame problem he has in that movie that has always bothered me. But in this one, they're dealing with real problems. Yeah, I mean, they're dealing with like racism and things that are actual, human cost issues, not just, oh, gee, I'm too special to stay here. Like, that's not a real problem, Matt Damon.
So we were talking about how this is a movie that is both funny, but is not afraid to have extremely dramatic moments. I'm going to talk early on in the movie. This is a scene that the watching of it was really riveting to me for a few different reasons. First, because it was very funny. Then because I thought the conflict was something entirely different from what it was going to be, and then became very dramatic. So right at the beginning of the movie, Colin is at a stoplight, and he has to get home before his curfew. For probation. And the stoplight, even though the street is completely deserted, goes on for a minute, 90 seconds.
That's true of all California stoplights, by the way. That is very common.
True
we've got them. I've got one just down the street.
It's true everywhere.
And
I thought I really thought that the scene was funny with him. Like, it was very relatable. I was like chuckling to myself just at him waiting at this completely deserted street for this goddamn stoplight to change when no one was around. And then I was like, okay, maybe the conflict here is he's going to decide to run this thing and there'll be a cop right there and it'll break his probation. But he doesn't. He has the restraint not to. And right when it turns green, a man runs in front of his car, a cop chases him, and he sees this man shot in the back by this cop 4 times, and the scene takes this turn from like light drama but mostly comedy to very intense very quickly, and it works. Like it's scary. It's a tone shift that works very well, and
it feels like you've suddenly been dropped into a horror film for a moment. It's intense. Also, the cop is played by Ethan Embry, by the way, which is just a very strange actor choice, but I mean, he did fine in it. it's just very funny to see Ethan Embry pop up again. Carlson's looking in the distance. If you remember That Thing You Do, I believe he was the drummer in That Thing You Do.
He's
I'll be
or the
damned.
guitarist or something.
Okay, all right.
You might also remember him from Empire Records and Can't Hardly Wait.
Oh my God! Holy shit! Now I got it right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah, he's the guy who looks vaguely like John Brookbank, if you remember him from college.
Oh yes. Shout out to you, Johnny. I think the horror movie comment really stuck with me, Borf, because the way they use police throughout the movie, I mean, he's torn apart by what he witnessed. You know, it sticks with him. But then it gets to this point where every cop he sees, like, he just kind of freezes, you know, and they make it reminded me almost like Sharks in the Water, you know, where it's just kind of like there's that one scene where it seems like nothing, but I mean, he knows that he's busted if this cop does the wrong thing, and lights on him and everything. Like, you really do feel like this is it. Like, this is going to be what could have been, you know, a sort of
I thought
buddy
that was going to be
conflict.
the ticking clock start.
Me too.
I thought that was what was going to happen, that he was going to get shot or something was going to occur, and then he'd be running for the rest of the movie. But they, again, surprised the heck out of me by not doing that.
I love it when movies make you lean into a punch and, like, just totally make you look foolish for doing so. I love movies like that. And that's why and that's why, again, even the title with Blind Spotting, there's a lot of payoffs about how you see other people and the interpersonal relationships, not just between Collins and the ex-girlfriend, but even Collins and Miles. Like, he sees Miles differently after that. And has he been blind spotting Miles this whole time? Has Miles been blind spotting him?
I mean, you could go a step farther even, because I think that both, in particular for Miles, I think Colin is in the middle of this self-reappraisal. But near the end of the film, I think both Colin and, to a lesser degree, the cop himself realized the way they viewed themselves was incorrect. Because I think the cop almost didn't realize what a brutal system he was a part of. I don't think they give him much sympathy in the end, but he's like, I think he doesn't, I don't know. I think there's something about it that he didn't understand. I think he's been indoctrinated into a specific way of thinking, just as Miles didn't realize to some degree the way that he was a part of Oakland, but not a part of the black community. Like, I think that there's these ways of self-evaluation that fail for multiple characters. I think Colin is the only one who is taking the time to address it.
Colin kept calling him stupid. Like, you keep doing stupid shit. You know, it's not about you being white or black. It's about you doing dumb shit, and I get the fucking blame for it. You know, and that seems to be true. I will say Miles does a little bit at the end have that, because I think he's the one who drinks from the gentrified juice almost, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a moment for him, for both of them, really, that, like, kind of not necessarily accepting change, but being ready that change is coming, you know. And I think that was a nice, in the way they just drive off into the sunset, it was nice. Like, I thought that the movie wasn't gonna, the movie had a potential to end very tragically on multiple facets, and didn't. And bringing up the cop thing, I think that the way that Embry plays it and the way that it seems like his life is presented, he's just surrounded in self-guilt. And Colin is there to remind you that you don't know how guilty you are.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know how guilty you are. And I think that was, well, it was powerful. I mean, the way I felt when Colin was rapping to the cop, I really felt like this movie needs to be shown today, because there's a lot of mirrors of, like, you know, now we're fucking mad, you know, like, it is, now we're just outraged, because you've left us no choice. You've left us no choice, you know, and again, like, he even says it in the rap, you know, quit worrying about the vases and start looking at the faces. Brilliant. Fucking brilliant.
It would make sense then that they picked Ethan Embry out, because I think he has, like, the star power he brought to this as being sort of the affable, friendly dude. The fact that you see him shoot somebody, it does add a lot of humanity to that character to see Ethan Embry, like, breaking down and crying. A lot of the stuff they talk about directly involving Miles and how he is acting as sort of like a gangster. He's acting like a thug, but Colin is the one who keeps taking the blame for that stuff. It really sort of laid out what I think is a very uncomfortable truth for a lot of people, which is that you don't really understand the privileges you have until you realize that other people don't have them.
And they're usually carrying the water for you.
Miles,
Yeah.
I think, even fails to recognize it among his own family. Like, Colin's mom gives Miles' wife this pamphlet called The Talk, appropriate enough, but it's clearly about talking to your child, if you're a person of color, about how to deal with the police. And it's not a conversation that Miles is involved with at all, because it's just not a part of his life in the same way it is for his wife and daughter. And the degree to which he even recognizes that is unclear.
When the kid raises his hand and says, "Don't shoot," I think there's a moment with Miles. Again, I got to hand it for this guy, for it being a first feature-length movie. I hope this guy gets a lot of work because he's really good in this. Like, I mean, maybe it's just because he has been working on it for 10 years and is intimately familiar with it. But boy, he's got a lot of chutzpah. I'm impressed. But I think that was the moment for him.
This is an honest old man question I have to ask. Was that a boy or a girl?
It was a boy.
Okay, I think you said daughter.
Did I? Whoops. Okay.
No, Powers did.
Oh.
Oh, I misspoke. Yeah, it's
okay.
a boy. The kid's name is Sean. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that moment when he that kind of pierces through Miles's, shall we call it, privilege or his own perspective. And again, he's blind spotted by that too, because he's only seeing a little kid and they're just trying to learn about cops, but he doesn't realize that the fear of any violence is going to make you react that way, because that's the only violence you've been really kind of clinically taught or indoctrinated to respond to. And I think that was very powerful use. I thought it was really great. And I think it's even more than the socio-political, economic aspects of this movie. I really liked it just because I love buddy movies like this where one guy is kind of not really outgrowing, but more or less kind of, you cause me a lot of shit and I never really get to say about it. I immediately thought of like, and I haven't even seen it yet, but like, Mickey and Nicky with Cassavetes and Peter Falk, or Mean Streets is also a good one to think of too.
I was like Shaun of the Dead too. That's a common thing.
Oh,
where
there
it's
you
like
go, buddy. Thank you,
friend,
Maddie. Thank you,
one
man.
friend is like ready to engage in
Thank
life,
you,
and
man.
the other friend is, no problem. It's that thing where like one friend is sort of held back a little bit by something, and the other one really wants to go out and start anew. Which I think is a challenge you feel with a lot of things that happen as you're like coming of age. Like you have friends that stay, like for me, I had tons of friends who stayed in Indiana, and I was like, man, you guys know there's nothing but corn here, right? We got to get out of here.
Colin isn't necessarily outgrowing Miles, but he's kind of at a crossroads in his life where things are going to change for him rapidly, and he's kind of in this moment of self-evaluation, whereas Miles doesn't strike me as the guy that takes moments to self-evaluate all that often. And I think that's what this movie for him, that was Miles's journey in this movie, was he's got to look at his own self every now and then. Whereas Colin, I think is trying to do the opposite. He's trying to realize how other people see him. It's really a great film. I really recommend it.
I think it was, I looked at a few reviews for this movie. One of them, in fact, was, to cut back something we talked about earlier, said that this movie succeeded in everything Crash miserably failed to do.
Hell yes. Fuck Crash. Fuck Crash. That's my stance forever.
A few other things, like, this movie was highly regarded as very much slept on in 2018. Part of the reason I wanted to see it is a movie review podcast I listen to sometimes called Double Toasted, which is hosted by two black men. We're like big fans of this movie, and I had known very little about it. And I was like, well, after they heaped so much praise on it, I was like, I'm really curious about this thing, and I never got around to it. I used this podcast as an excuse to do it, and the fact that it's finally on HBO Go, if the viewers who want to see it, I think it's
soon they're going to be without HBO Go.
It's short.
In that.
It's only 90 minutes. It's quick. Like, I'm surprised by how short this movie is. Obama put it on his best of 2018, apparently. But
I mean, it's a good film. It makes sense. I really liked a lot of the actors, the performances. It was sort of surprising seeing some of the people that were picked. I don't know if they were just known to the actors originally or not. Like most people would know him as Nedry from Jurassic Park appears. It's
Wayne Knight.
Wayne Knight.
Oh,
they have a
come
couple
on.
other
Everybody knows him from
Newman.
Newman from Seinfeld.
Well, yeah,
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, there's also like one of the other ones that I was happy about was, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when they went into the barber shop, the lady who runs the barber shop is Martin Lawrence's girlfriend on the TV show Martin. And she's also Chiffon from Little Shop of Horrors when she did that all the way back in the 80s. So for me, for a very specific interest in Chiffon from Little Shop of Horrors, because every scene they appear in is the best, I was extremely excited. I really, in a completely dorky way, I wish she had come back for more of the movie, because I was like, this lady's funny. I want to see more of this lady in movies.
For sure. Yeah.
Every one of these people can keep making movies, as far as I'm concerned, and that's why I'm amazed that Hollywood slept on this, because it seems like right up like the Academy's like right up their purview. I mean, it seems what they would look for. I'm just shocked by it.
Yeah.
But I mean, then again, me saying the Academy has done anything right, the last thing they did right was give Parasite the Best Picture.
I think even in some ways it felt like me watching the film that not only the backbone of the spinal column, as you call it, of hip hop through the movie, it does seem like obviously this director who we've discussed did music videos. He's an immigrant from Mexico City, not born in the States. Which is another thing that the Academy could try to get behind to get some of that Oscar so white shit off their back. But it seems like there is some DNA from like other prominent Black filmmakers of the past, because there were times in this movie, especially when they would just go through their community and meet people and have these conversations that were very stylized and all.
Do the Right
and a lot of
Thing.
the way it was shot. Yeah, I couldn't help but think of Do the Right Thing at certain points.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. And it's sort of hard, but like yet not quite on the nose, you know, like it's not, it's just like around the corner. Like I you know, homages are great. You know, I'm a big fan.
Oh
But
yeah. I don't think it was ripping it off. It just, there were parts that felt like it.
As a quick thing to put this film in context too, because you were asking why it got a pass at the Oscars or didn't get a lot of buzz. The year prior, at least 2018, which would be the year this came out, which is the year prior in Academy Award years, Get Out was the best screenplay, and then the following year, the best picture was Green Book.
Green Book. Yep.
And it also had Black Panther, Black Klansman, Bohemian Rhapsody. There were a number of other films that came out that were all dealing with different parts of this. It's interesting that people gave Green Book Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay against something like this, though, since Green Book was outed as pretty
Inaccurate.
untrue,
And
inaccurate.
one of the writers is kind of a racist douche, Trump
Pretty,
supporter type.
Whitewashed. Yeah.
I will say I enjoyed Black Klansman. I think I like this movie better.
Yeah.
I
think
completely agree.
Yeah.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. I mean, I like Black Klansman too, but I this movie was, I even like, I mean, I thought, you know, I keep bringing up Sorry to Bother You just because they seem to be cousins or whatever, just because they're shot in the same town at the same time. But I even liked it more than I like that. I mean, Sorry to Bother You has a lot of flaws. It's a very strange movie. But again,
Well, it's surrealism. Like
It'd be a fun movie to talk about someday, because that movie has 10,000 ideas crammed into a 90-minute runtime.
Yeah,
and
it's
it does some better
crazy.
than others. And I enjoy that movie a lot, but it was aiming for so many concepts, and it needed to cut it down just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I mean, I liked it,
It
but
has about 15 midpoints that keep occurring where something changes and you're like, oh, this is the movie now? But I love that too, because Boots Riley is kind of a wild man on that. So
Fuck
the
yeah.
fact is
The
that
coup,
that
baby.
was,
Love that shit.
That was a real wild movie.
But I even like this movie because, again, it's more human. This is a movie that's a lot more universal in its presentation, because this, again, it boils down to pretty much just a buddy movie. Everybody's had a friend that you're like, God, do I have to go out with him again? Everybody's had that. Typically it's me. But
This movie deals with the subtlety and the humanity of those two characters on a little bit more of a fundamental level. I've noticed, and this isn't to
Borif, you just earned my bonus point, buddy. I had it circled. Plot revealed through character, my friend. You got my bonus point.
When you brought up Do the Right Thing and Spike Lee, I think they're different filmmakers. It's a fundamentally different time. So a lot of the stuff that needed to be handled in a little bit more of an on-the-nose way, in this movie is handled in more of a subtle way. So, I've enjoyed BlacKkKlansman and I enjoy a lot of Spike Lee films, but they're not gentle, subtle films. They're usually more about the overt violence and actions that are happening and the fact that it needs to stop immediately. This one was much more about the humanity.
I won't say how BlacKkKlansman ends, just in case our listeners haven't heard it, but it's not overt. They make their point as clearly and obviously as possible.
Yeah.
It's a lot like people giving David Simon a lot of shit for doing Plot Against America.
I would say
it's very overt.
It's very overt, yes.
Yeah. It was like, people were giving David Simon a lot of shit for Plot Against America. Oh, nice subtle jab at Trump. And David Simon's like, I wasn't being subtle. I was not trying to be subtle. But that's but I did read according to IMDb, they are trying to greenlight a series, a TV show based off of Blind Spotting. Which I don't know what that would look like if you don't cast these two guys doing it. I mean, they'd obviously be EPs and probably write a few episodes, but they probably wouldn't have time at this point to
my gut
do
tells
it.
me that if that gets turned into a show, they would just do that themselves.
I don't think that these guys are either to the level of fame where they would turn down a television show. I mean, I think Daveed Diggs said yes to that Snowpiercer series. Like, he's on that.
At first, when I saw that, before I watched the movie, I was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, they made Fargo into a TV show and it kind of rules, so, anything's possible. But then I watched it and I was like, okay, I get why they're doing this as a TV show, because you really do like these characters. And I could stand to do a couple more adventures with Miles and Colin. Like,
and the film is not an end-all, be-all story of these characters or Oakland. It's just a chapter. Like, it feels like you could keep going,
a slice of life,
and explore other concepts, other issues within specifically Oakland or the Black experience in America, or
just
and you class.
Obviously, there's a market for it. It would be like Atlanta. There's a market for kind of humorous takes of the Black experience. I mean, obviously Atlanta's in Georgia, but I think that they would, if it looked anything like Atlanta, I'd sign on.
For sure.
Well, I mean, it's also like we're living through the golden age of TV still. Like, just to bring it to like a more business standpoint, it's so much easier to imagine a TV show turning into, it's so much easier to imagine a movie turning into a TV show now than it was previously, because way back in the day it was unheard of to see a movie turned into a TV show, and it was just
usually it was the other way around.
Usually.
Almost always crap. Yeah, and now you get your Fargos and your Hannibals and stuff like that.
Well, you get. Are we really saying that MASH sucks, guys? Are we really going to say that MASH the TV show is a piece of shit?
Yes, the extremely transphobic.
Okay,
MASH
well,
show.
Okay, all right. Okay. You've got me there.
There's probably some exception.
I'm left on a mound of sand.
Freddy's Nightmares, I'm sure, was a classic in the television, a jewel in the television landscape.
Oh my god, that one's hilarious, because it somehow manages to have an entire TV show that uses the main character as the intro host, and nothing in any of those stories ever touches on any of the mythology in any of that nonsense.
I believe
ever.
Friday the 13th, the series, I think, was the same way. It was an anthology that rarely, if ever, involved Jason.
Never did, and it was a fun show, but never had any context with Jason at all.
Yeah, I mean, back
Not
in the
even a
80s, it was Reagan capitalism, right? You got to turn everything either into a TV show, and preferably a kids show where you could sell some fucking toys. Get that real Ghostbusters money.
Especially in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, cable television was brand new, so I mean, they just had to jam anything on those fucking channels. Look, they're paying for 100 channels. I got to fill it with something.
I mean, you gotta make a toy the kids want to go join the military with. So start pushing that GI Joe. I mean, it's totally normal for a child to want to immediately go pick up a gun.
There you go. And then they grow up and they're gonna watch Rambo, and the cycle continues. And they'll make little Rambos who will want their own GI Joe kids, and so on and so forth. But no, I really think that this show, if they wanted to do it as a TV show, I think it could fucking work. If it was these two doing it and they wrote it, like I can see that going places where I could, I think that would be an enjoyable. Because again, I like it. I like a movie when I'm so enamored with the characters that like I can keep watching, and I would like to see where else their life takes them. And the movie doesn't really button up all that, doesn't solve all the social and economic problems, not by far. Nor does it even fully develop their own evolutions. It gives you just a tinge, and then they just drive off into the sunset. And I thought it was great, and I think again I can do for another episode. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think that it has the benefit, we've discussed this over the course of this podcast, of being able to balance comedy and drama. I mean, you could have a full episode that's mostly just funny, and then one that's much more dramatic immediately thereafter. And with this tone, it works.
Yeah. I think racism in general, and dealing with racism, it's such an absurd concept that people believe it even is a reason to judge someone on. That I think it lends itself to surrealism a lot. Because we mentioned Atlanta, we mentioned Sorry to Bother You. Atlanta had a number of episodes that were pretty surreal, or asides that were lyrical and playful. Like, for instance, the whole episode where the guy just wanted to get his hair cut and just kept following the guy around. It's interesting to see a movie that is hopeful, that is written about and deals directly with continued human misery and the subjugation of an entire people, that until the rise of the internet and some of the things to make it far more easy to recognize how badly people are being treated, it was way easier for a lot of people to sweep it under the rug and ignore it. At this point, I'm really hoping that people start listening and take it to heart, and that hopefully we'll get the current political situation shook out. I know we're not really a political podcast, but it would be nice to see some real changes, so that the situation with cops, for instance, being an omnipresent boogeyman in people's lives would stop being the issue that they're having to deal with, because you need to change that whole institution from the ground up, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I think that the rage of his final soliloquy against the cop, again, I felt like, dude, this is now. Like, I really, really fucking felt that. Like, and that's it. We live in a crazy time right now where, again, I think what the powerful moment of that to the cop, and I think that whether or not he recognizes it, the movie doesn't say, but is that you may not have meant to do this, but you did mean to do it. You did mean to.
That's how it. I mean, I think he says something like it was an accident to Miles after Colin leaves, and Miles says something like, "Was it?" It's just this man who, even though he's personally racked by guilt, fails to comprehend the fact that he is part of a system that is fundamentally violent and oppressive. And whether he gains any insight on that or not is unclear, but like, his guilt is he has chosen to be part of this monster. Like, cops in the movie, for the most part, except for this guy, are presented as cop cars without faces in them, because you don't need to see the faces. It's a monolith. It's a system that is, I don't know,
like inhuman,
a beast in the streets, stalking people.
Yeah, there's a real reason why when you see riot police wearing helmets, it's terrifying. It's because those aren't humans anymore. Those are like automatons wearing masks. Yeah, they're stormtroopers. They don't have any humanity to them. So it's like, if you're being bludgeoned by someone, I think most people would like to assume that you'd be able to reach out to someone's humanity and say, please stop hitting me. But that isn't the case with with the situation.
Yeah, and that's why, again, I think that nowadays, it's because cameras, I mean, this is something that wasn't even that prevalent when we were doing the podcast 10 years ago, but I mean, cameras are everywhere. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket. It's getting a lot harder for a lot of this shit to just be swept under the rug.
The original run of this podcast was recorded prior to Trayvon Martin.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I've also just with the protests happening, as you were talking about with cameras, I have found that ACLU actually has a app where you can record cops live and just anonymously upload it to prove events of violence or other things like that, which just didn't exist before, and it was kind of unheard of to think that you would have to record a cop doing his job. But now it's like a standard thing. You walk up, and if you see someone pulling someone aside, if I see a cop talking to a homeless person, I get my phone.
You whip out your camera immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a moment in the movie where I really kind of liked, and again, living in the parlance of our times, but when they're watching the news report of the guy who got killed by the cop, and they bring up the fact that he had like an assault felony, he's an ex-con, and Miles even says, "No protests for you," and again, this constant notion that, well, just. If he hadn't run, he wouldn't gotten shot. Well, when is that going to happen in a fucking first world? Like you can't run after him and tackle him. You got to pull out your gun and fucking gun him down. Come on.
Yeah. That's also very upsetting too, because you realize that Miles, like they don't get into this in the movie, but because Colin is a former con, he can't vote, and a great deal of issues that we kind of ignore are things he would have to deal with on a day-to-day level.
The first thing I thought of, and I thought about when Zach pitched the theme of Shitty Cops, the first thing, and maybe, again, it's just recency bias, but is When They See Us. We couldn't do it for the podcast because it's a TV show, but that was a show where I was really like, I will probably never watch it again because it's very, very tough to watch. Very, very good. It was robbed at the Emmys. But I think they should teach that shit in schools. I mean, like, just because there is this, them being falsely accused and going to prison for something they didn't do was only the beginning of their fucking nightmares. Going back into society was a whole other nightmare into itself. And how easy is it to just fall back into it because it's easy money and you need money? You can't do it. So, I mean, I think that, and again, this movie does a great job of sort of hinting at that, talking about it, but not really making it the forward thrust of the whole movie. The plot's barely the thrust of the movie. Him getting out of probation is barely consequential in this movie. The only thing it's used for is to understand Colin's point of view. Gotta stay straight, gotta fly right, cannot do anything wrong, can't step out of line. That's that device. It's not necessarily a plot device. I think the plot of the movie is, again, really Miles and Colin's relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also probably the idea with the convict thing probably communicates the issue that he feels as a black man in general to a way that people that aren't from that experience might be able to understand it. Because when he goes into the halfway house, he gets pulled aside, and then the guy who runs the halfway house has a conversation with him about, you are a convicted felon. The only way you can make us believe you are not is by continuing to always not be a convicted felon and to always act in the right way.
Yeah.
which
can't even run a stoplight.
I mean, the
can't
thing
even run a
is
stoplight.
That, they get into that when Colin gets seen by the police. Like, he's having to act extremely careful and polite around any sort of authority figure because it's real danger. Now, we understand it because, if he gets caught, he's a convicted felon, he'll go back to jail. So that's like the general thrust. But it has a very deeper thrust to that, he's dealing with being an African-American engaging with the police.
Very true. Very true.
The scene where he is caught on the street, he has wrested the gun away from Miles because Miles beat the fuck out of somebody and shot it into the air at the gentrifiers.
At the yuppie party.
So they had a confrontation, he steals the gun away, and a cop comes up on him while he has the gun in his pocket and shines his light at him for an inordinate amount of time. And it's not even necessarily whether it's about him going back to jail. The threat there feels like, will he be killed in this scene? Both for entirely different reasons. But I think maybe we should give our last thoughts on this guy.
Yeah. I'll go first, and then Zach, and then Bor, if you can close us out, and then let us know what we're watching for next episode.
Sure.
Okay. So final thoughts on this movie. I thought very well, more than well done for everybody's basically first foray into feature-length movies. Part of the reason why I like doing this podcast, I get to learn new things, and it took them 10 years to do it, and it shows. It shows that not just in the narrative craft of it, but in their own performances. They're very close to these characters. They know these people. So, and it comes through in their performances. Very well done. It's very rare for a movie where I'd be like, yeah, I can see it as a TV show. So yeah, fucking good movie.
Yeah, I think this movie was extremely adept at tackling some very major issues, things that are extremely relevant today in a very subtle way, in a small scale way. I think that their love for their hometown of Oakland, like, it's nice to see movies that are love letters to a place in a way. And
For
this
sure.
is definitely one of those films. I think if you have missed this movie right now is the perfect time, if you have access to an HBO account, to go check it out. It's 95 minutes. It's, that's the other thing. This storytelling is tight. Like, they don't waste time.
Fuck yeah.
So I got to recommend this one. It's for a blind pick, I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. We were blind spotted into it.
Yeah, I definitely am going to recommend that people see this one as well. I will give one of my 3 points for today to Zach for having suggested this one. I think that it is wonderful to see, as you said, a love letter to an area that is steeped in the history and the vibe of the area. I think that you can tell that these characters are people that they based off people they knew. They feel very lived in. You can tell that there's a lot of history between these 2 actors and a rapport that I think we mentioned briefly in The Lighthouse, actually, how hard that is to find sometimes. But you could tell there was an immediate and a very deep comfort between these 2 men that, is really great if you can find 2 actors that have that sort of camaraderie. It's, again, extremely serious subject matter, extremely serious topic. It is a fun film, which is punctuated by moments of fear and extreme terror, which is very strange to think that it would do both. So, since we are on the topic of police brutality and bad cops as a general concept, my suggestion for next week is the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Ooh.
It is on Netflix right now, so people can go see it before the end of the month. When this episode comes out, though, I think it might have left Netflix, so good luck. You can find it somewhere. It is
Disney Plus, I'm sure.
Yeah, Disney Plus, the first place you go. I won't pitch it up too much. It's just a film that was based off the Zimbardo experiment from the 70s, and it is written by Tim Talbot, and it is a good film, and I guess we will all find out about what that is going to be like soon.
I'm excited.
As a quick summation, it sounds like, I believe Russell gave Chris an extra point at one point during the show.
I did. He did plot revealed through character. I wrote it down.
Chris
I said I was going to give my
one,
point to that.
So that's where we're standing on our point distribution for the time being. With that said, this has been The Movie Trap, and I've been Zach Powers.
I've been Russell Carlson.
And I've been Chris Boroff until next week, when I'll still be Chris Boroff.
We get it, bruh. Your car has an alarm. Congratulations, it's fancy. Bitch.